I'm Gold Derby's Matt Noble here with Mike, oh man, Bigaboo?
Oh no. Oh no.
Sorry, Mike Birbiglia.
That's how I say it.
That's it.
Although in fairness, I was just in Rome. Strangely enough, I met the Pope this summer.
Yeah,
A bunch of comedians, Stephen Colbert and Chris Rock and Whoopi Goldberg, a bunch of people were invited to meet the Pope so he could
yeah.
speak to us about comedy and the importance of comedy. And I almost have changed the pronunciation in my life to Birbiglia because it's in good conscience. You can't go to Rome and hear this beautiful language and then look at this hard G and go Birbiglia. There's something about it that's so off-putting.
Yeah. Well,
So
Bigaboo, a callback to your first joke on
yeah.
Letterman,
Yep.
I believe.
Yep. That's right.
And your comedy special, the Emmy nominated for this year is The Old Man in the Pool.
That's
Uh,
right.
Mike, I want to start by just asking what was the most important thing for you with this special and what you wanted to say and get right.
I started writing this after my last special on Netflix which was called The New One, which is all about having a child, even though I never wanted to have a child, and then all the reasons why you should never have a child, and why I was right, and then why I was wrong, and and then after that, I was just kind of free associating, and what I realized is that a lot of the topics that I was free associating about were mortality based, and about a year into the development of that, this is like 2019, of just doing a lot of stuff about life and death, and swimming, that's where the pool comes in. The pandemic happened, and of course, death loomed over the entire world in that. And so I just dug in, and I was like, I just had this kind of vision of it during the pandemic of like, what if I could write an entire special that the topic is death just over and over and over again, and we laugh about it for 90 minutes, and then at the end of it we feel somehow better leaving the theater than when we came in. That was literally my goal.
Mm. I think you say in the special that people don't like to think about death or talk about death or something like that. Um, did you like writing the jokes? Did you like writing about death?
Yeah. Yeah, I love writing jokes about death. I love writing, I talk about this on my podcast a lot. We This coming week we have Stephen Merchant on, who's like
Oh,
one of my idols. Like I just, between The Office and Extras, just two of my favorite TV series of all time. And we talk about how, when you're writing stories, like so often, as comedians, people often say like, how soon after the tragedy occurs can
yeah.
you
Oh,
turn it into comedy? And for comedians, we're like, show tonight, I would talk about the tragedy. Like, in some ways, it's like why I think a lot of people became comedians is that it's a coping mechanism. And yeah, literally, my show right now, I'm talking a lot about my dad. That the show I'm touring with right now. I talk about my dad having a stroke and how it's been really, really hard. And then I make a joke about it. And then if the audience feels tense, uh, most of the jokes tonight are for you, but a couple of them are for me. This is a coping mechanism, and I hope it is for you too. And I feel like that's how I think about comedy. Is it's a coping mechanism for me, and I'm trying to share it if it does that for other people.
yeah, like, and even in the special, like talking about things for you too, like there's like a few moments, like particularly there's one where you talk about the we know Mo, like
Yeah, we know.
like when you say that, you like look up and you just have that joy in your face as you're like,
Well, I mean, the joy is based on, if people are watching this and they haven't seen the special, go on Netflix and come back to it so it doesn't ruin the joke. Um, but it's based on a real thing, which is there's an app on my phone that you set a timer and it shuts off your lamp or whatever outlet is in the wall. And you set it for 20 minutes. So I'll read a book. And if I'm still awake and I'm reading the book, it just goes and it's the closest I've come to experiencing my own death. And I was thinking they could market that as sort of a death simulator. They could call it We Die or We No Mo. And it always makes me laugh still, even though I've told the joke 1,000 times, because I still remember the first time it happened, where there's certain things in life where you just go, oh my God, this is like a simulation. This feels like a simulation of my own demise.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's good. What like with those moments that you have on stage of joy, like what gives you joy about comedy and performing? Like,
My favorite thing is watching the audience react to what I'm doing, because that's the thing. As a comedian, that's what you're doing every night. So you might change, 4 words or 4 sentences or 4 minutes or 40 minutes on a given night. It could be this small or this big. But what's different every night is the audience. And so, like, there's this part of the show, and if people haven't seen it, again, watch the special, but it's like where I say, there was a sign at the YMCA pool and it says no breath holding. And I say to my swim instructor, what does that mean? She goes, well, there was a guy who died holding his breath. And I say, I make a series of jokes scolding the audience for laughing, because inevitably someone will laugh and then I scold them. And the more I scold them, the more they laugh. That literally came out of an improvisation one night at the Cherry Lane Theater in New York, where I was doing like a residency. And I was telling the story about the no breath holding. And and people were laughing, and I was surprised at how much they were laughing. So I was like, oh, okay, if this is an improv scene, what's a funny angle? Oh, well, I could scold them for laughing, and I could be kind of a school teacher. And it became like, at certain ways, it became like a 20-minute piece of the show, and then over time it scaled back to maybe 6 or 7 minutes. um and then it ends up arriving at this idea of, like, any of us could be the man who died holding his breath in the YMCA pool, and all we have is this moment right now. And then I don't want to give away the ending, but the ending's the ending. But yeah, I absolutely love live performance, and I love seeing what the audience does when they're given these jokes.
yeah, like that's really cool to hear that like it's almost like jokes have a life.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. What like you would the special you talk about mortality, and we've talked a bit about that. Like you talk about some of the big fears and darkness in the world, and like you do it through comedy. Like where does anxiety and comedy meet?
Well, that's interesting. I mean, I think it meets, I would say most comedians have a certain sense of anxiety. And I guess how I, maybe not clinical, but in a general sense, a concern and a buzzing for the worst case scenario that could happen in the near or long term future. And I certainly have that in spades. It is my best quality. No, it's not my best quality. It's something that I work on. I try to live more in the present, but for comedy, it's phenomenal, because essentially, and as a screenwriter, it's phenomenal, to be honest with you, because you're trying to game out, like, okay, if this worst case scenario, what else? What else? What else? What else? If this worst case scenario, what else? What else? What else? What else? And people who have anxiety are just able to do that endlessly. So I would say, in that sense, it's a tool that you try to steer in that direction.
Yeah, and like what I guess what is sort of what like it is, so I'm not questioning it, but like what is sort of funny and where is the comedy in the darkness and in our fears?
I think that the comedy, the laughter that comes from dark comedy, I think, or at least the type of dark jokes that I tell in this show, are based on saying the things that feel like we couldn't say them in polite company. Like if you were at a dinner party or something, you maybe wouldn't talk about how it's sort of weird that we cremate people. And like, I think about all the time that my wife and I haven't written our will yet, even though we were supposed to do it like 5 years ago. Like all these things where like if you brought it up at a party, it it would be odd. Like people, a constant thing in my life is people will say, "Oh, that's so funny that you're a comedian." Like people who don't know me as a comedian, they don't know me as Una's dad or Jen's husband kind of thing is like they go, "You're not, you're not making jokes all the time." And I always have to explain that if I said the things I said on stage in kind of a social setting, it's not that it would be a conversation ender per se. It would just be a little bit awkward.
Yeah, that's good. Like, you've worked in comedy for so long. Like, has what you've found funny, has that changed and evolved over the years, or has it been pretty consistent?
I think when I started out, like the people who I was most interested in the 90s when I was in high school and college were like Mitch Hedberg and Stephen Wright and um, people who did a lot of like observational comedy or kind of like really abstract one-liners. And I had this breakthrough in 2008 because that's what I did like probably the first decade of my career. I started when I was like 19. And when I was about 30, I wrote this first solo show off Broadway called Sleepwalk with Me. And it was all about how I sleepwalked through a second story window. Speaking of anxiety, I sleepwalked through a second story window in Walla Walla, Washington at La Quinta Inn, a motel. And it was real. It's a real story that happened. And I talked about it. And I talked about it in relation to why I never wanted to tell stories like that growing up, because my dad would always say the phrase, "Don't tell anyone about personal things." And once I had done that show, it changed my whole orientation to comedy because I was like, okay, I can still do observations. I can still do observations about how we pronounce the word La Quinta
Mm.
in, or how, when I was a kid, I wasn't good at reading and how we do these SRAs and I was always terrible at doing them. But I can have that as part of like a larger narrative, and that the larger narrative can potentially connect with the audience in kind of a deeper way than just the observations back to back to back stacked up over an hour. And two things that really helped me in that journey were This American Life, because I started working with Ira Glass on telling stories for the radio, and then the Moth storytelling series, which is also a podcast. Both of those were things that kind of took me out of my comfort zone and forced me to tell stories in a way that I may never have ended up telling stories. And those things and Sleepwalk with Me were the big drivers to that.
Yeah. In The Old Man in the Pool, what was the sort of most challenging sort of bit to sort of work on and refine?
I mean, usually what happens is there's a couple things. The single hardest thing was the ending. It was something that I don't want to give it away, but it's a very specific ending. I've never seen it in a special before, and it was something that occurred to me like 2 years into the process, where I was like working it out in little theaters and things
Oh,
like
sorry,
that.
Mike, you
It's
just
100
cut
theaters,
out
and
for a
and one
second
day
there.
I was just like, what if it ended like this? Oh yeah. Um, did you the ending? Should I say that?
Just that
Can I say
little,
that?
yeah, just that little bit you sort of cut out for.
Okay. So 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 the ending of the show, and I won't give away what it is, but that was probably the biggest breakthrough, and it came about 2 years into the process. I was doing like performing in little theaters and workshopping, and all of a sudden I said, if it ended like this, and he was like, try it. Like he literally, that's his mantra. He's always like, try it, try it. And we tried it, and there was a gasp in the audience. And to me, that's always the best thing. If there's a gasp, is like you're on to something. And so so that was the biggest thing. And then the other thing was it's usually the beginning and then the ending, and then usually somewhere in the middle there's something that becomes hard to keep the audience's attention. Like my whole focus when I'm making these shows is I always ask people for constructive feedback, I always say, when were you thinking about your shopping list? When were you thinking about, oh, where are we going to get drinks after this? Like,
Mm.
when did you think about something else during the show? And so that was like a precise thing along the way. It was like I kept asking my friends that, and eventually arrived at where we arrived.
Mm. So, like, you talked about the ending, but also just the set you use, the way you move on the pool and use the screen and the journal entries and stuff like that is very sort of distinct and gives it a, very unique sort of feel as a special. Um, you go to the journal a couple of times and things you write in your journal. Do you also have a journal for jokes and observations, or is it the same journal? Like,
It's both. Yeah, I do. I have multiple journals, but what's funny is sometimes my joke journal becomes very personal, and sometimes my personal journal becomes very jokey. And a lot of times I'll go through, there's a line in The Old Man in the Pool where I talk about journaling, and I say I like to write my journal every few nights because I find if you write down what you're saddest about or you're angriest about, you can start to see your own life as a story. And when you start to see your own life as a story, you can try to encourage the main character to make better decisions. And I think that's true to some degree. And I also think sometimes you find jokes in the journals that are just 6 months old or a year old or 2 years old, because you look back, and this goes back to the anxiety discussion. You look back and you go, oh my God, I thought my problem was this. I had no idea my problem was this. And there's something so funny about that. I mean, it's as funny as like the guy who's scratching the itches on his arms, and then he doesn't realize there's a fucking bear behind him. You know what I mean?
yeah, and your which bear from your first Letterman set as
Yeah.
your biggest fear?
Biggest fear. Yeah, yeah. That's why I brought it up.
So very good. But you got an Emmy nomination for best writing for the special. What does that mean to you? Your first Emmy nomination?
I'm it means a lot to me. I mean, I think of myself very much as an admirer of what happens in Hollywood, but someone who is somewhat outside of it. I mean, I live in Brooklyn. I've never lived in Hollywood. In a lot of ways, I've just done these shows in New York for years and years and years, and then I tour the world, and so it does feel like I'm gonna be at the Emmys when I go. I'm gonna be very starstruck. I think I'm presenting at the Creative Arts Emmys, and then I'm going to both, and I'm going to the primetime because I think the writing is in the primetime thing, um, though untelevised, which is not lost on me. But it's like a one section that's not televised. But it's like, yeah, it's a weird thing. Like I'm gonna be totally fanning out on like my peers of which is yeah, it's exciting.
Mike, that what was I going to say? That in Hollywood, there's so many award shows over in LA that some people go to award shows 5 days a week.
Nobody goes to award shows 5 days a week.
No, there are people who go to award shows 5 days a
Kate
week.
Winslet goes to award shows 5 days a week. Yeah.
What's your favorite?
Naomi Watts goes to, I'm trying to make it local for you.
Yeah,
Naomi Watts goes to award shows 5 days a week.
no, not even Naomi Watts. Oh, we switch roles. Like, to end, what's your favorite joke in the special?
Oh man. I think my favorite joke in the special, because it's so simple, is like I went to the doctor and he asked me to step on the scale, which is for some reason still the old-fashioned abacus thing, where he's like, "You're not 1,000 pounds, you're not 0 pounds, you're not 970 pounds, you're not 21 pounds." And I'm like, uh, can I get a second opinion? But it's like it's so silly, but it also, you know, it's just it's one of those like little things where the moment I wrote it, I looked up like, has anybody else written this joke? And I couldn't find it. So I was like, okay, great.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. Well,
And the Anamata pizza joke,
ah, yeah,
which is I love pizza so much. I get excited when I see the word plaza.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I
Yeah.
really like that one. Um, like Well, it's been a blast chatting. Goldderby.com, people can follow the Entertainment Awards, and all the best of luck for your Emmy Award nomination.
Thank you, Matt.
Great to see you win that. And just thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
It means the world to me. I hope to see you in Sydney.